release of Spider-Man Far From Home, it's time to dive in and re-rank all 8 Spider-Man films now from worst to best. This is going to be a ton of fun, guys. So without further ado, let's get straight into this review. And make sure, guys, if you guys are new here, to comment down below and let me know what your ranking is of every single Spider-Man film. Number 8, it's going to be Spider-Man 3. Now, Spider-Man 3 is a movie that as a kid, I actually really liked. And as I grew older, I just started kind of disliking it more and more. I don't think it's a horrible film by any means. I think it's a fine, decent movie with a lot of bad elements to it, but there's also a lot of good elements to it. Take out Peter Parker and his whole little dancing sequence. Yeah, we all remember that. Take out Venom. I think Sandman is one of the most intriguing Spider-Man villains to date, and I actually wish it would have just focused mostly on him. I understand that you have to kind of go into the Harry Osborn situation and the whole Hobgoblin type thing that he's going about and how he's kind of playing out that Green Goblin situation. It was fine, whatever, but Sandman is one of the biggest saving graces throughout the whole entire Spider-Man 3. The score is still brilliant. I think Sam Raimi had a lot of issues from the studio wanting to place Venom in there, and without a coherent story, it kind of jived away and took away from having Sandman in there. It is possible to have a bunch of villains in one central film, but it's just how you try to give them each time. Plus, Topher Grace's Venom was bad casting. Coming in number 7 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, I actually don't mind this film. I actually quite enjoyed it at times. I get what Mark Webb was going for, even though it does still have that mess of having too many things going off on about and trying to just get to the next sequel and set up that Sinister Six movie they were planning. Besides that, I think this is a cartoony, fun Spider-Man movie. It feels like a Saturday day morning cartoon that you would wake up and watch as a kid, and you're like, oh, this is a fun Spider-Man movie, and that's kind of how it is. There's a lot of fun to it. Is Electro a bad villain? Abso-fucking-lutely. At the same time, I actually still liked how they had Electro and the way that he would fight around. Some of the cinematography shots in here are great. Some of the action shots are great, and that relationship between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone in here is still superb. It's one of the strongest parts and the strongest through lines through all the Spider-Man films. And in this film, that is the strongest part of it. The way she dies is still emotional each and every time, and each and every time, it makes me cry. Bringing me to my number 6, that is going to be The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, The Amazing Spider-Man, I will defend like every other day of my life. I love this new retelling of the origin story. I think it's easily the best out of all of them. I think Andrew Garfield does such a great job as Spider-Man and as Peter Parker. It's a darker tone in a weird sense, but also kind of a meaner, more brooding tone, but I actually don't mind that. I like the tone that they went for. It reminds me of some of the other issues that I would read of different Spider-Man origin stories, but I did like what they did with Andrew Garfield. I love his suit in here, and I really like that they went with the Lizard. I think the Lizard is a very unique villain. They didn't give Dr. Connors a lot to do. I think the Lizard and the action sequences that happen around Spider-Man are still a ton of fun, and there's a lot of an emotional crux in there when either you look at Gwen Stacy's dad or even following that relationship between Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. Brings me to my number 5, and my number 5 is the very first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. This movie, I remember the first time I saw this movie, it was in a drive-in theater. I was watching it. I was kind of scared because Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is horrifying, but this movie is brutal. Like, I mean, it's still brutal. It doesn't really hold up to the day's standards when it comes to a storytelling aspect, but I think Sam Raimi's direction, he was the best director for these first 3 Spider-Man films that we ever got, just because of the way that his tracking camera that he always uses in almost each and every one of his films, the way that he brings it into the Spider-Man universe, the way that he tells his origin story, the way that he dives into the depth and deviations of all these kind of horrific things that happen to Spider-Man are very intelligent. And bringing about Green Goblin, if you haven't seen the test mask that they were supposed to use, I wish they would have used it. I know it was a little bit heavier on Willem Dafoe, but the suit they still use is horrifying, and the moment when he's fighting him at the end and ends up dying, it's a powerful moment, and I really, really appreciated this, and it's just, I really like how brutal these movies are. Before we get any further into this ranking, guys, make sure to leave it again down below in the comments what your guys' ranking is, and hit that like, subscribe button, where I get to do tons of early movie reviews and other type of rankings on this channel. Plus, he has an Oscar over sandwich on films on how to see films early. Bringing me to my number 4. My number 4 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming is the John Hughes Spider-Man film that I've always wanted and loved. Actually, after seeing Far From Home, this movie even got more enhanced for me in a lot of different ways. I think Homecoming feels like a kid's movie. It's supposed to feel like a coming of age story for a kid who's trying to find out where is his place in this world when you have these abilities. I love that tone that Jon Watts took into this movie. It truly does feel like something John Hughes would have made in this day and era, and especially coming off Civil War and now kind of knowing the further of what's going to happen in the MCU. Spider-Man Homecoming is enhanced to all those different moments. Plus, you got to talk about Vulture, who I think Vulture is top 3 MCU villains still. Michael Keaton does such a great job as the Vulture, but still portraying him in such a unique way that makes you care about him. And the twist, oh my god, I remember the theater just went, oh! And then you find out it's the dad, and they're like, oh my god. Great moment. It's lots of fun in there. The one big thing in there is I wish there was more web slinging, but I understand he's still just kind of getting used to his powers. Coming to my number 3, that is going to be Spider-Man 2. Now, Sam Raimi made a definitive film that this movie tackles Spider-Man in a very grown-up way. It's Peter Parker. He's trying to balance his life out. And even though I kind of wish they would have just focused more on the balancing, the thematics about that, it's his relationship with Doc Ock and the way that it just turns sour so fast in such an emotional but brutal way. Plus, Spider-Man 2 features one of the best action sequences in comic book films ever, and that is the train sequence. When Doc Ock and him go at it on the train. It's a brutal experience, and I just remember being in the theater as a kid. I was like, oh my god, with my eyes and my jaws right on the floor. Easily, this is the best relationship between MJ and Peter, and the way that their relationship kind of gets punctured up throughout this movie. Coming in at number 2 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This movie changed my life. I went into this movie not thinking anything, not really even excited for it. The animation looks cool, but I wasn't excited for it yet. I was just like, I don't know what to think about this. Walked out of the movie totally blown away. It was my favorite film of that year, and I would still hold by it as the best film of that year. In fact, I thought the film should have actually been nominated for Best Picture. I thought it was that well done. Whether you talk about the animation, the direction, the writing, the excellent casting that they bring about in the film, whether it's Nicolas Cage as Spider-Man Noir, Jake Johnson as Spider-Man B. Peter Parker, or even featuring Miles Morales as the main protagonist. It's such a movie that features a great soundtrack that enhances the movie, just kind of how the Black Panther soundtrack enhanced it. The Spider-Verse soundtrack enhanced that movie. And it brings about such an emotional feeling to it, but also just punctures through many memorable moments that are not just funny and witty and charming, but also, again, goes back to that emotional moments of intense, brave, and the themes that Miles has to go through, the ways that he has to learn of how he has to become this hero now in a world that he's never really known to, and how he has to understand that is excellent. So you just further out the world and a lot of cool world building and adding in the multiverse and adding in a bunch of different Spider-Mans, it makes for such a unique theater experience that truly surprised me. Speaking of surprising, we're talking about my number 1 and my number 1 favorite Spider-Man film. As a big Spider-Man fan, this film was everything I wanted it to be, and even more, and that is Spider-Man Far From Home. I know this just came out. I know it's just come out, and I don't care. I will preach everything about this movie. I think some people will be like, oh, really? That's your favorite Spider-Man film? I seriously think this is the best live-action Spider-Man film. I would even go as far as say it's still the best Spider-Man film, even over Spider-Verse, which just came out last year. Spider-Man Far From Home is a movie that starts good. It starts good, and I was in for it. I was like, this is a good movie. And then something happens, and my jaw just dropped on the floor. Just fell right off. Someone hit the pedal, and the car just never stopped going. It just went full speed ahead and totally shook me, surprised me in different ways that even I wasn't even ready for. A lot of the things that happen with Mysterio, Jake Gyllenhaal's perfect casting as Mysterio, this movie feels gritty at times, especially a lot of the action sequences in here, which are not just innovative and creative, they're unique. There's something I've truly never seen in a film before. I've seen some things in a video game, but never in a film before. Adding in where we get more web slinging now, I have to say these are some of the best web slinging moments that I've ever seen in a Spider-Man film. Seeing him swing around the city, seeing him swing around the battlefield, and the way that he's moving around, the way that he's destroying stuff, the way that he's using his spider senses is just so great. Jon Watts has a hand around this character, and I truly hope he comes back to do the third film, because I really need him to finish out this first trilogy of Spider-Man films that we've gotten through the MCU. There's a nice little connection to the MCU, but overall, this is a true Peter Parker story, and the relationship between him and MJ in here, I wasn't expecting really to love, but I fell in love with Zendaya as MJ and fell in love with their chemistry with one another. It's so relatable back to high school, and this film, in the end of the day, just had a big goofy smile on my face, whether it's from Mysterio being one of the best new characters in the MCU, over to Tom Holland perfecting the Spider-Man role to another level, the thematics that they told throughout this movie of just wanting to be a plain high school student to also having to be a hero, or whether it's the greatest end credit scene of all time. I said it. Some great action sequences, an amazing score. Spider-Man Far From Home is my favorite Spider-Man film, and I can't wait to hear what your guys' thoughts on this film are. So let me know down below, guys, what is your ranking of the Spider-Man films? If you guys are new here, hit that like and subscribe button, of course, because you guys are always great for that. And make sure to check out Sandwich on Films as well. But, of course, guys, make sure to have a webtastic time. I'll see you guys soon. Stay classy.